Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most astonishing rags to riches stories ever recorded. I mean, we all hear about people hitting it big, right? But the sheer scale and honestly the origin of today's story is going to absolutely blow your mind. It is this perfect, crazy reminder of how incredibly unpredictable life can be and how your circumstances can change in literally the blink of an eye. So let's get right into it and look closely at Jack's sudden billion-dollar rise. $1 billion. Over 1 billion, actually. Just let that sink in for a second. That wasn't the valuation of some massive tech startup. That wasn't a lifetime of corporate earnings from a global CEO. No, that massive, frankly unbelievable figure was the final auction price of a single, solitary item. And where did this item come from? A high-security vault? A sunken pirate ship? No way. It was pulled straight out of a trash can on the streets of New York City. So how exactly did a literal piece of trash create a billionaire? Okay, let's dive into this because the contrast here is just insane. We're talking about the absolute extremes of the human experience. On one hand, you have a guy living on the cold concrete, struggling just to survive another day, completely dependent on the spare change of strangers. And on the other hand, sudden, unimaginable, generational-turning wealth. To really understand how this happened and fully appreciate the wild reality of this whole thing, we have to look at how Jack ended up on that street corner in the first place.
Section 1. Fall into homelessness. Before we get to the massive windfall, we really need to rewind the clock and look at Jack Anderson's life in New York City. Because it's important to remember that Jack wasn't always on the streets. Honestly, it's a sobering reminder that the line between a comfortable life and utter destitution can sometimes be terrifyingly thin. He used to have a job, a home, a family, but life can sometimes deliver a series of just devastating blows. In year one, he lost his job. It's a hardship a lot of us can relate to, but for Jack, it was the first domino to fall. Without an income, year two brought rapidly mounting debt. The bills just didn't stop coming just because the paychecks did. By year three, that debt led to the absolute loss of his home. And finally, by year four, the downward spiral was pretty much complete. He was left with absolutely nothing, forced to sleep under bridges or on park benches in the middle of the city. A series of hardships had completely stripped away his livelihood, his home, and his family. He became totally invisible and ignored on the streets of New York City. Just imagine sitting on the edge of the pavement, day in and day out, begging for basic help just to get a bite to eat. Thousands of people rushing by in one of the busiest cities on Earth, completely caught up in their own worlds. They would just walk right past him. To the city, he was essentially a ghost. And you know what the craziest part is? Not a single one of those pedestrians, those wealthy business people rushing past, had any idea that they were completely ignoring a man who was about to become one of the wealthiest people in the entire country.
Section 2. A dusty wooden box.
Now, this is where the story takes its massive, unbelievable turn. It was a freezing morning in a really wealthy neighborhood, and he was just doing what he had to do to survive. Step 1, searching for leftover food behind some affluent restaurants. This was the exact moment that a completely routine, desperate morning turned into a historical event. Step 2, he was digging through a large trash can, really just hoping for a discarded meal, when step 3 happens. He discovers this totally ordinary, dusty wooden box. Now think about this for a second. He was looking for food. This box wasn't edible. It looked like junk, just covered in thick dust and grime. But inexplicably, for some reason even he might not fully understand today, he decided to pull it out of the trash and keep it.
So I have to ask you, what do you actually think was inside the wooden box? I mean, if you were holding a dusty old box pulled from a New York City dumpster, what would you expect to find in there? Old shoes, broken glass, just completely discarded junk? Take a second to really guess what could possibly be resting inside this piece of literal trash that would eventually be valued in the billions. Well, when he finally pried it open that evening, he definitely didn't find food. He found old historical documents, some vintage photographs, and, crucially, a strangely engraved metal coin. Jack pulled out this heavy piece of metal, and it was covered in very old, ancient-looking engravings. It didn't look like any normal currency. It was odd, it was old, and it was sitting right there in his dirty hands. Now, what's really interesting about this is that peculiar metal coin. Section 3. The hidden heritage.
You gotta remember, Jack wasn't an antique expert. He just thought, hey, maybe this is a neat old trinket. Maybe I can sell it for a few bucks to get a warm meal, right? So, completely unaware of the absolute treasure he was holding, Jack took it to an expert the very next day. And the moment the expert laid eyes on it, his jaw practically hit the floor. He looked at Jack and goes, "Do you have any idea what this is?" It wasn't just a trinket. This was an extremely scarce historical artifact. It was a rare early American coin. And not only that, but after further investigation of the coin and the documents that were inside the box, they realized this was the lost heritage of a highly famous industrialist family. We're talking about a collection that had been missing and frantically sought after for decades. There are only a few samples of a coin like this existing in the entire world. It was a globally sought-after piece of American history.
From there, the whole thing turned into an absolute frenzy. Step 1, the media breaks the story nationwide. I mean, it was the ultimate rags to riches headline. Step 2, immediately global collectors, some of the wealthiest people on the planet, all gather for the auction of this insanely rare artifact collection. And step 3, when that auction actually began, the tension in that room was breathless. The bidding started in the millions, but it didn't stop there. It absolutely skyrocketed. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions. The bids just kept climbing and climbing until it crossed the unbelievable threshold into the billions. Literally in one single night, the man who had zero money for food became a multi-billionaire. Section 4, rebuilding through giving back. Because, it would be really easy for the story to just end right there. Guy gets incredibly rich, buys a private island, story over. But that's not what makes Jack's story one of the most beautiful and inspiring narratives we've ever covered in an explainer. What he actually did with his sudden fortune is what truly matters, and it says literally everything about his character. With billions of dollars, look at what he could have bought. He had enough personal wealth to last for generations. He could have bought endless, unmatched luxury and never ever thought about those cold streets again. But instead, look at what he actually built. Because Jack never forgot the deep, biting pain of poverty, he chose to become a profoundly compassionate philanthropist. He built homeless shelters across multiple American cities. He opened free food centers so no one would ever have to dig through a trash can like he did. He started education foundations for children in need. He actively chose to give back. And I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful quote from an interview Jack gave a little while later. When people asked him about his unbelievable journey, he just smiled and said, "I didn't just find a coin, I found hope. As long as a person doesn't give up hope, their story isn't over." A single, totally random moment changed his entire life. But it really leaves you wondering how many other priceless pieces of lost history are sitting in landfills and dumpsters right now, just waiting for someone to look closely enough. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.